The Detroit Lions just wrapped up their third preseason game in preseason week 2 against the Miami Dolphins, losing 24-17. So let's talk about it, talk about all of the training camp updates and storylines that have been going on since our last video a week ago following the preseason game in Atlanta. And yeah, man, let's just get into it. But before we do, if I could get you to hit that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on. As you know, training camp has been going on for a few weeks now. I've been making a lot of videos lately. Just had a film breakdown about Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker go up earlier this week. So make sure you have the notification bell so you don't miss content like that. Make sure you go back and check out the videos that have been posted on the channel so far. And let's go ahead and get into it. And actually, relating to that video I made just a few days ago, we should talk about the QB battle between Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker. Although at this point, calling it a QB battle seems a little generous to Hendon Hooker because we are getting dangerously close to the point where we have to start thinking about leaving him off of our 53-man roster predictions. And this game Saturday morning was no different towards changing that narrative. It was very similar, actually, to what we've seen from Hendon Hooker in all of the preseason games in his entire career thus far. It was not good. Now, of course, Kyle Allen was not good for a good portion of the first half as well, was getting really frustrated with him leaving throws a little too high for his targets. I know that Isaac TeSlaa had at least one that was too high and bounced off his hands. Well, bounced off his hands in the sense that it hit his fingertips, and if it was any lower, he would have caught it. I think Dominic Lovett had another ball that was just too high. Meeks might have had one that was too... There was another guy. Actually, I think it was Tom Kennedy. Anyways, Kyle Allen was leaving a few throws way too high. He also took a very unnecessary delay of game penalty, like procedural penalty, that was just unacceptable. And in general, for a good portion of at least the first quarter, Allen looked a little out of sorts, not at all the confident self that we saw from him last Friday. However, in the second quarter, he really roared to life and started to make some more confident throws, started to show that decisiveness, and he was pushing the ball down the field, really got Jackson Meeks involved in this game. We saw more of Isaac TeSlaa as well, and Allen started to look a lot better. It's kind of this weird thing with confidence that we talked about the other day, where when a QB has it and they're willing to push the ball into these tight windows and they're honestly just giving their guys a chance to make plays, good things tend to happen. Whereas when they play reactive and they're maybe holding the ball too long, looking for the perfect play instead of just making a good play, that's where problems start to creep up, and that's what we'll talk about with Hendon Hooker in just a moment. But Kyle Allen winds up finishing this game 14 of 17 for 124 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of those coming on a 4th and 7 where Jackson Meeks just got wide open. I believe it was Shane Zylstra running a clear out route that just left Meeks all alone for the easy score. And then Isaac TeSlaa getting another touchdown this preseason on another jump ball where Kyle Allen just gives him a chance to go make a play, and he absolutely does, dunking on the defender, which was a very nice play by TeSlaa, and his hype train, we'll talk about in a second, is getting out of control. Overall, I think Kyle Allen showed enough to where, again, we know what Kyle Allen is. In the last 2 weeks, he has at least looked like a guy. Is he going to be good if he's forced into action? Maybe not against a starting level defense, but for the time being, at least he's making some plays, and he looks like the far superior quarterback. So for now, he's QB2. He did nothing in this game to prove that he shouldn't be at this point. And time's ticking for Hendon Hooker. Speaking of Hendon Hooker, he started the second half of this game, and immediately all of the problems that we've come to know from him resurfaced once again. He was way too eager to scramble. It was, I think, the second play of the half where it was either a designed rollout or he just wanted to start moving right away. Regardless, he doesn't recognize where the defensive pass rush is coming from, and he runs himself right into a sack, essentially sacking himself running into his tackle. Just horrible. A couple plays later, he holds onto the ball far too long and takes an unnecessary sack. And then the play after, the pressure's getting to him a little bit, and the throw on a check down is like 3 yards too short, and he just spikes it into the turf. The pass was not deflected. It was just, he got too antsy and he just threw it to the ground. Overall, Hendon Hooker finishes 6 of 13 for 61 yards. He also throws an interception at the end, which honestly wasn't even necessarily his fault. Just a fantastic play by the Miami defender, but at the same time, kind of just indicative of the kind of game Hooker had. It was a fitting end to this game. Which, by the way, this game was so bad. There were so many flags. The officials were so trigger happy with that yellow penalty marker, and it was honestly brutal. There were 22 penalties in this game, 13 against the Lions, 9 against the Dolphins. That is just beyond egregious. The officials were ruining every aspect of this game. There was a play early on where Craig Reynolds, he bounced a play to the outside, picked up like 20, 30 yards, and it gets called back for a hold. Now, I have my gripes with Tom Kennedy on this play because you didn't need to hold the defender, but he's also barely grabbing him. It's such an insignificant hold, and the defender doesn't make a significant effort to get away from Kennedy. Seemed like a soft call. There was another very soft holding call later in the game on another Craig Reynolds run. On Hendon Hooker's scramble touchdown, the holding call was honestly not very strong either. Like, the officials were just not having a good day. They also threw numerous flags that got picked up. Watching this game was a challenge. Now, defensively, there were some challenges as well. Quinn Ewers, the Dolphins' third-string quarterback, that'll probably end up being the backup because he played very well. The Dolphins were moving the ball very effectively in the second half. Although I do want to shout out the Lions' defensive backs. They were getting their hands on numerous passes throughout this game in both halves of play against both quarterbacks, and there were a couple near interceptions. They were forcing the ball out. There were a couple of forced fumbles. They couldn't recover them, but the Lions were doing a good job hunting for the football. And when you're dealing with 7th, 8th, 9th string defensive backs, it's pretty impressive to see that they were at least able to hold their own against some of the Dolphins' backups. Also want to shout out Grant Stewart, who once again continues to be one of the most active players on defense in the preseason. He's not going to be a staple of the defense in the regular season, I hope, fingers crossed, but he has shown that if he is forced into action, he is not going to be lacking for intensity or competitiveness. That dude is everywhere. Also need to shout out Isaac Ukwu, who gets himself another sack. He has really shown some chops as a pass rusher this preseason, and he's going to probably make the roster at this point. He could be a situational pass rusher for the Lions on a defensive line that's really lacking for pass rushers in general. And the one sack he got, it was on a 4th down inside the 10-yard line, and he just destroys the left guard on the play and essentially picks up, it looked like he was an unblocked blitzer. That's how quickly he beat his man. He also had Anthony Pittman rushing right behind him. It was just a jailbreak on that play, and Ukwu was the first one there. He picks up the sack, gets the stop, turnover on downs. It was very nice to see, and that came just a couple of plays after he had another sack wiped out by another soft penalty. That one was against Grant Stewart, funny enough. So yeah, Isaac Ukwu continues to build good preseason games here, which comes off the back of building on good practices here in training camps. So yeah, he is really trending in the right direction. And then let's talk about the wide receivers, Jackson Meeks and Isaac TeSlaa. Meeks finishes this game with 7 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown. TeSlaa 4 for 41 and a touchdown. Granted, TeSlaa only played the first half, so you can forgive the stat line not being as good. But once again, Isaac TeSlaa just showing his size and his ability to make contested catches. He has been outstanding this preseason, and we are starting to hear the drumbeat. Could Isaac TeSlaa challenge Tim Patrick for wide receiver 3? We're getting to the point where it's a serious conversation in the sense that it could happen. Not that it's going to happen right away, because obviously TeSlaa has not repped with the ones in camp really at all, so that's the next step of his progression. But he has at least shown that he is a very good depth contributor. He's going to be wide receiver 4 or 5, and he's going to factor into the offense in select packages because he's been too good to keep off the field. Well, I actually talked about this on the podcast with Alex a few days ago, where the percentage that he surpasses Tim Patrick by the end of the year is starting to grow. A week ago, we were saying like 20, 25%. Now we're saying like 30, 35% maybe, where if Tim Patrick is exactly what he was last year, which that's not a guarantee given his age, and TeSlaa continues to ascend throughout the season, it's not inconceivable that by the time the playoffs roll around, assuming the Lions get there, TeSlaa could be challenging for a starting job. And then as for Jackson Meeks, he is in a very interesting position because he is currently competing with a guy like Dominic Lovett, Ronnie Bell, Tom Kennedy for the 6th wide receiver job. The only problem is we don't know if the Lions are going to keep 6 wide receivers. So he's kind of competing for a job that may not exist, which is a tough position to be in, but he has been very good over the last couple of weeks. I criticized him for a very bad drop he had when Hendon Hooker was in the game to start the Atlanta game a week ago. But to his credit, he answered with the deep shot connection with Kyle Allen. He had a touchdown from Allen later in the game. And then in this game, he catches 7 passes, almost has 100 yards, gets in the end zone once again. He has just shown to be a pretty steady contributor and someone the Lions are going to have to seriously consider keeping. Speaking of Dominic Lovett, he also was returning to action after dealing with an oblique injury over the last couple of weeks, and he was okay. He had 2 catches for 14 yards, nothing special, although he did have a fumble recovery playing gunner on special teams after a muffed punt. I mean, kind of a right place, right time sort of situation, but he is proving that he can be a contributor on special teams. That's where he sort of has a leg up on Jackson Meeks at the moment. Need to see more from Meeks in a special teams role if he wants to make the team, probably, because I feel like if you could combine Meeks' production with Lovett's special teams chops, I feel like you would have a really solid depth piece there. In this case, it's kind of a pick your poison. Again, if Meeks can show more on special teams or if Lovett can show more as a receiver, that's how those kind of guys can push for a job on the 53-man roster. And then lastly, I do want to shout out Sione Vaki, who also returned to action in this game after dealing with an injury the past few weeks at camp, and that guy was everywhere. He had a hit on special teams after an early punt where perfect placement, head on the football, and he forces the ball out. Again, Lions unfortunately don't recover. He looked pretty good as a runner, had 5 carries for 30 yards, which you can't take too much away from, but he did have a couple of nice runs, showed some nice bursts, so as a second-year player who is a converted safety, he's starting to develop as an offensive weapon. He has proven pass-catching ability. He's showing good wiggle with the ball in his hands, and obviously is a special teams ace. He's going to make the team. That's not in question at all. But I would like to see what else he has to offer offensively, because I think just knowing that you have some depth at more of the pass catching role at running back would be reassuring. The way the Lions operate, Craig Reynolds is the primary backup to David Montgomery, and Sione Vaki is the primary backup to Jahmyr Gibbs. So just proving that he can handle some of those responsibilities, working on his pass protection, for instance. He had a couple of good reps in that today as well. So just continuing to develop all aspects of his game just to be a good depth piece, push Craig Reynolds for RB3, all of that. Speaking of Craig Reynolds, it is an absolute crime that the Lions are using this man this much in the preseason. Once again, he had 6 carries in this game, which why you have other guys that can carry the football. We really do not need to see Craig Reynolds run the ball this much. He's too important of a piece as the third running back to be using him this much in preseason. Then aside from that, I do want to just mention some of the notes coming out of joint practices with the Dolphins over the past few days, because there are a couple of things to talk about, namely the fact that the Lions in practice looked dominant against the Dolphins on Wednesday. Still had a good day on Thursday, though obviously Miami bounced back a little bit. It's tough to dominate back-to-back days of joint practices. Typically, whichever team quote unquote wins the first day, the other team responds in a much bigger way the following day. That happened, but it wasn't as pronounced as I think people were maybe bracing for the Dolphins to bounce back from. Obviously, Miami is not the best team in the world. Some of the receivers were out. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are limited right now, but to be fair, the Lions are missing some pieces on defense as well. Terrion Arnold just working his way back. Ali McNeil's obviously out, so there are some bodies that the Lions are missing as well, so I'm willing to overlook the fact that the Dolphins were shorthanded. The most important note, though, from these joint practices is that the Lions' offense seems to be getting back into a groove in practice after a couple of weeks of not necessarily struggling, but certainly not operating at the efficiency that they want to. Amon-Ra St. Brown was having a dominant day. Jameson Williams had a couple of very nice plays. You saw the highlight of him having a bomb touchdown, it was like 50 yards, beating Ifeatu Melifonwu like 24 hours after getting in a fight with former Lion Ifeatu Melifonwu at the end of Wednesday's practice. So you'll have to see JMO's gamesmanship there, because he immediately got in Melifonwu's face again. But the Lions offense just seemingly looking a lot better. We're hearing a lot of positive feedback about the offensive line. Tate Ratledge especially is getting a lot of praise from Dan Campbell, and it seems like now that we've settled into Graham Glasgow being the center, Tate Ratledge being the right guard, now the offensive line can just work on gelling as a 5-man unit, and it seems like they're starting to click in that regard. Now, going into next week, be on the lookout for how the Lions do in joint practices with the Houston Texans, who are a little bit more intense of a team than the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, the Lions and Texans played last year, and that defense really got to Jared Goff, getting 5 interceptions. So, going to be very curious to see how the offense handles a hyper-aggressive defense like the Texans that plays a lot of press man, has a really good corner like Derek Stingley, and can cause the Lions a lot of fits. I think they'll present a much different challenge than what the Lions typically deal with, even though it might be similar to some of the coverages that the Lions secondary runs in practice. So maybe in that regard, it won't be as bad. But at the same time, the Lions defense has been outperforming the offense to this point. So I'm very curious to see how the Lions offense is going to perform. And then obviously we have one more preseason game. We've got to see how Hendon Hooker and Kyle Allen do in their last chance to kind of cement themselves as QB2 at this time. It seems like Kyle Allen has the lead in that race, but things can change very aggressively, and we're getting very close to having to submit the final 53-man roster as well. So yeah, man, the season's only a couple of weeks away. I think it'll be 3 weeks from tomorrow, I believe. So we are that the Lions play the Packers at least, not that the NFL season starts. That'll start even sooner. So yeah, man, starting to get excited. Things are starting to ramp up. Some of you might have had your fantasy drafts already. Like, football season is in full swing at this point. So with that being said, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you loved it, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. I'll be back later in the week with another film breakdown, and then we'll be recapping the last preseason game next weekend as well. We'll be talking about 53-man roster predictions. We'll be starting to preview the season a little bit more wholeheartedly. And yeah, man, football is real. Football is right around the corner, so super excited for that. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.